So, continuing on, let's hear a bit more about deacons and some more info. It's Deacon Day after all, right?
I have to tell you, when I put on the collar this morning, I almost didn't recognize myself in the mirror. I was just absolutely like, who is this person? My husband didn't realize who I was either. So it was really quite funny. I actually do like black because it's pretty slimming. I feel like I've lost about 10 pounds. So I recommend it highly. I may wear this every day. Okay. Let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Mother of us all. Amen.
Amen.
Most people in the ELCA, which is the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which we're a part of, didn't always have deacons as we understand them, or at least not in the form and the fashion that we see them today. Just by a show of hands, how many of you knew that the Lutheran Church had deacons? Some of you, yeah, some of you, that's good. There have been a lot of changes in the last decades related to deacons. And so the diaconate has changed a lot, even in the last 5 years, actually. But let's start with some history. As I have said many times here, I was a history major, and I approach all things from a historical context. So let's start at the beginning, like the very beginning. Deacons originated in the New Testament in the book of Acts, where 7 people were chosen to assist the apostles in the community care. So this role is really ancient. Some would argue older than the priesthood. In the early church, deacons had significant responsibilities in liturgical, charitable, and administrative areas. During the Middle Ages, the role became more formalized, and it was more basically a liturgical role. But as the medieval ages and some of the other ages, as we've moved forward, it's become more of a service role, more like how we see it today. In our Catholic and Orthodox brothers and sisters tradition, you have to become a deacon before you can become a priest. That's not the case in our tradition. In the Protestant Reformation, it was really interpreted in a different way. It really was focused on service and charity. And looking a little more like it does today, in the more modern area, different Christian denominations, like our Baptist friends, they see deacons mostly in a governance way, which is very different in terms of how the deacons in our tradition serves. So what about our Lutheran tradition? And let's talk about the diaconate in our tradition. The deaconess movement in Lutheranism traces its roots back to 1830 in Germany, and it drew inspiration from the early Christian church. We saw mostly deaconesses on the East Coast and in the Nebraska Midwest area. We didn't have as many deaconesses in our part of the United States at the time. But as time has moved on, the deaconess role has stayed together, but it's been folded into another ministry. And so this is a little bit of the confusing part, because this is going to be a little complicated. In 2016, we had 3 separate rosters. We had associates in ministry, we had diaconal ministries, and we also had deaconesses. So we had 3 rosters. And as that has evolved over time, we've ultimately come to 2016, where we have decided to merge all 3 of those rosters into one. And John is going to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you're throwing some terms out here, rosters and diaconate or diaconate, deacons, deaconesses, pastors. What does rostered leader mean? So now that we had all those 3 rosters combined into one, we just have rostered leaders, whether you're a deacon or a pastor. And so what does that mean? It's complicated because of all this different history, because of the different denominations and backgrounds people might have, but that's okay. Complicated, we can deal with complicated. The relationship together that we have in ministry will see us through those complicated situations, those complexities and confusion. So what's the rationale with all this?
Well, the unification was intended to streamline the structure and the process, because these 3 rosters, these streams of deacon-like roles had different expectations. They had different jobs that they did. While there was some spirit of similarity, they really decided, the ELCA Churchwide Assembly decided that it would be helpful to have everybody under this one roster with the same kinds of responsibilities and expectations.
And that happened January 1st of 2017, so we're well into that, but not as far in as some of our other sibling denominations. So all these individuals previously rostered as associates in ministry or diaconal ministers or deaconesses were automatically transferred into just this one.
Correct. We actually touched on this in the children's message, but basically, just to reiterate, it's really the deacon is really to serve the intersection of the church and the world. I am here to support you and nurture you in pastoral ways so I can lift you up to do the kind of work that needs to be done outside our doors.
Right. Yeah, so education and formation are a big part of what you are called to as a deacon, and I think really resonates with you in particular, right? So candidates for word and service ministry typically complete a master's degree and undergo candidacy process. So candidacy is kind of the parallel process that goes on with the education side. And that's the education is through the seminaries, the graduate theological institutions that are part of our tradition. That's part of the seminaries, and then the synods and the denomination proper does candidacy. So different stages there to say, yeah, we want to support you through this and make sure you have all the tools that you would need for that.
Right. I think the best thing to hear from this piece that we're sharing is that the way the diaconate looks now is very new to the Lutheran Church. And so in many ways, we're pioneers. We're getting to shape this ministry together. And so I think in many ways, that's very exciting.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to go into something new and explore what this role could mean, but I think it also gives a lot of flexibility and creativity, openness.
Yes.
So let's flesh out a little bit of the distinctions, not the compare and contrast.
Yep.
I'm here, you're over there, but let's see how deacons and pastors can be a little bit different. So deacons are distinct from ministers of word and sacrament, pastors. So deacons are word and service. Pastors are called ministers of word and sacrament. So just in that name, it helps to get us into a little bit of the difference. While pastors' first focus is to preach and administer the sacraments, preach, administer the word and sacraments, both here. Deacons are a little different in that, in short, again, they're not junior pastors.
No.
It's not how this works. It's not pastor, junior pastor. Part of the reason for putting all of this into one rostered leadership list, is to not say one is above the other. Rather, ministers of word and sacrament, pastors, serve with active, courageous faith to offer the hope of the sacraments and to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ in congregations and other ministries. They are public leaders and public servants. Ministers of word and service, deacons, serve in congregations and other ministries of the ELCA, including family ministries, youth, administration, volunteer ministry, social services, music, and all this kind of good stuff. Deacons connect the church and the needs of the world and work to equip others to lead a living faith, living active Christian faith. So they are public servants and public leaders. So everyone, all the rostered ministers go through this training. I went through 3 years of classes and a year of internship. You've gone through a different track.
Yes.
Not better, not worse, just different. And so we all go through this process. We have that candidacy, we have the preparation that we go through, and the certification. And so we have all of these pieces. So how does this all play into it? And especially with this service of the congregation, we have this thing called pastoral care. How does pastoral care work if you're not a pastor?
Yes. I think the best way to explain this is to tell you a little bit of a story that I had, a question and answering time with a deacon. And we were talking about the similarities and differences, a lot of like what we're doing today. And what she shared with me is that there really is certainly an overlap between the two rosters. Obviously, proclamation of the word, but also pastoral care as well. And this is the part that really stood out to me. A deacon cannot ask a community to do God's work outside the walls if they don't have a call to care from me as the word and service deacon. In short, you must know and be engaged in the caring of those you are calling into the world. And so that is the difference.
Cool. So, kind of go over a little bit of this. Both can preach, because we both have that word as the part of our first title. So word and service, word and sacrament, both preach. For now, one presides over Holy Communion. Neither hold either of these things over each other's heads. Mm-hmm. There's that overlap between the two, especially these days. Some differences lie in the ordering of those focus areas. The pastor's first and primary focus, again, here. But then also going out. Mm-hmm. Deacons are able to really bring us out in a different way. We're able to really identify these as places where the worshiping community of faith can go out, shepherding and caring for the congregation here. The deacon does that too, as empowering the congregation and equipping them to go beyond these walls and comfort zones and favorite pews that we find where we sit each week. John, good job. You're over here now. And things are different. As Jack had said, what you might have understood deacons to be in either a different denomination or in years past in the ELCA. Mm-hmm. Things are changing and reforming and transforming for both rostered groups even. And the distinction of word and service and word and sacrament, they just continue to adapt to the needs of the people, the needs that God has drawn us to. So we've gone over the history, we've gone over some of the distinction. What does this have to do with Mark 9? We read the gospel. So what do we got here? So I'm going to read a little bit from that again just to refresh us. Jesus teaches his disciples about true greatness in God's kingdom, about preaching his death and resurrection. He finds the disciples arguing about who is the greatest. Even the disciples had some of these things to go through. Jesus responds by saying, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." He then places a child in their midst, saying, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." So this passage actually speaks directly to the calling of deacons. As servants of Christ's church, deacons embody Jesus' teaching on servant leadership. They are called to put others first, serving the needs of the community rather than seeking their own glory or status. It's an ebb and flow of lifting up individuals who can lift up the group. In this case, empowering and equipping Jack during his training, his internship, his CPE, kind of spiritual care training. It's this ebb and flow of lifting up Jack, equipping him, and supporting him with the increase of different responsibilities, the ebb and flow, letting go of other pieces, and his journey to become a deacon who can already and will especially help and serve us all by empowering and equipping all of us in the congregation and support us in becoming even better seekers of justice, peacemakers, and servants of all. To quote the ELCA candidacy manual, I know you all are looking for that manual, but it actually has some good stuff here. It says, "The grace of God revealed in Jesus Christ means that all the baptized, as members of the universal priesthood of believers, are called to a vocation of mission in their daily lives. Members of this priesthood are gifted, enabled, and called to active participation in God's mission, both in their faith communities and in the world. So all that is to say, we are lifting up certain leaders in the rostered leadership, but really this is a part of how we are responding to the same call all of you have as well, to be active participants in God's mission of serving others, of being together, of lifting up both word and service.
Speaking of welcoming the child, I'd like to tell you a young story of mine. I'm a Southerner, so Southerners are storytellers. So you're going to hear a lot of stories from me over the next years. I'm going to give you the Cliff's Note version of that. From about 8 to 11 years old, I had this clubhouse and had my neighborhood friends. And we would gather to play games in this clubhouse. And we would read stories, you name it, just basically just sort of hanging out. But probably around age 10, I decided that my clubhouse would double as a church. I was an awkward kid, and for me, church was one of the safe places. So I was just sort of reenacting the safe place in my own home. So much so that my parents would even take me to church and drop me off, and they wouldn't even go to church. I would go by myself. Ultimately, I decided to open my own church service with my neighborhood friends as my congregation of 4. We would sing songs of the ones we could remember, and I would preach, and I have literally no idea what I said to them, quite honestly. And I presided at communion with Welch's grape juice because I grew up a Methodist, and Wonder Bread. Connecting this, Jesus' example of welcoming a child and teaching about servant leadership provides a powerful model for the ministry of deacons, and indeed all Christians. Deacons, particularly in the ELCA Word and Service roster, embody this approach, serving those who are vulnerable and marginalized in society, extending Christ's welcome to all, especially those who may feel unwelcome. This stands in stark contrast to the disciples' argument about greatness, with Jesus counters with the radical notion that the true greatness lies in humble service. And I'm going to jump off script for a second and just say one of the things that Pastor John and I talked over the past 9 months is me wearing this collar, because I didn't want to single myself out. I didn't want to be seen as the great person, because I see this collar as a symbol of humbleness. Because there's so much to be done out in our community, and you as well, I hope, will be called and humbled to go and do that work with me. Deacons model this countercultural approach to leadership, reminding our church of the call to this leadership and putting others before our personal desires and recognition or power. This challenge to rethink our understanding of greatness and leadership applies to all the followers of Jesus, whether serving in a clubhouse, a soup kitchen, or some other context. It's a calling that permeates all aspects of life, inviting us to be last of all and servant of all, in whatever capacity we find ourselves. I want to close by saying that we are all called by God in some way. Some of us are pastors, some of us are deacons, and some of us are called into our own lay world, our own places where we live and work. We are all called. Maybe you are called to be a pastor or a deacon. If so, come and talk to us. We'll be glad to share our journeys with you. I want to say thank you. As a congregation, you have supported me in many ways, including your listening to me as I've navigated this call, and also financially by supporting my CPE class, which officially started last week, which I was talking about earlier. I am moved by your generosity and your love for me. I've been here 7 years. It's hard to believe that it's already been that long, and yet it also seems really short. You have welcomed me and my husband, Chris, and I'm so thankful for how you have embraced us. I can literally not do this work without your support in all its forms. Thank you. And since this has been a wildly successful sermon, make sure to join me next week where I preach solo, and you can get your tickets on Ticketmaster. Oh, no, it's not. Thank you.
Well, now that you all are deacon experts, one more question for you, Jack.
Thank you. Yes.
If we have any more questions, I mean, we were pretty good and covered all the topics. But if we come up with some new questions, should we just hold them to ourselves?
Bring them this way.
Well, inform everyone that wasn't able to be here, but bring your questions. We want to engage the congregation in this process, in this CPE chaplaincy training. That is, what does that mean exactly? Ask him later. And yeah, come and ask some questions.
Sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
With that, I invite you to stand as you're willing and able. We're going to warm up our voices again after this little while, and we're going to sing.